Hello, and welcome to Upstream at AKS, the series where we dive into how we're building cloud-native experiences in the open source community. Thanks for being here. My name is Lachie Evenson, and I'm a product manager on Azure's cloud-native ecosystem team, where our mission is to help make the community successful on their cloud-native journeys. We have an awesome team that you'll find in almost every part of this ecosystem, and today I'm happy to introduce my colleague, Qasim, who is a member of our Upstream Observability team. Welcome, Qasim.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Excellent. Please tell us a little bit about what you do at Microsoft and in the cloud native ecosystem.
Yeah, so I'm actually part of the team called Upstream Observability and maintaining a project called Inspektor Gadget. So Inspektor Gadget is an open source CNCF sandbox project. And what it is trying to do is trying to simplify Kubernetes observability. Apart from that, I've been working in open source for about 7 to 8 years and contributing to different projects in containers and Kubernetes ecosystem. For example, I also maintain a plugin called Header Plugin in Core DNS, and really excited to be here to talk about Inspektor Gadget.
Oh, excellent. So you really piqued my interest when you said Inspektor Gadget for one, because I was a fan growing up of that show. So definitely love that. And two, you said simplifying observability in Kubernetes and cloud native. And I think we don't often think simple and cloud native going together. So I really appreciate that kind of intersection there that you're making. So tell us how Inspektor Gadget simplifies Kubernetes and cloud native observability.
Yeah, that's a great question. So Inspektor Gadget is actually like I mentioned, is an observability framework. And what it is doing is trying to collect all the low-level telemetry data using this technology called eBPF. Now, eBPF itself is like gets all the data from like different Linux subsystems, but since it's low level, it's missing all the Kubernetes context. So what Inspektor Gadget is doing is kind of injecting all the Kubernetes context into it. Let's try to kind of just see an example. So for example, DNS in Kubernetes. So it has like different components. So you have core DNS, you have like this node local DNS, upstream DNS, and you really want to see what happens to your request when it goes through these different components. So we are able to collect this data, like put your raw DNS request, put like the name of the pod, the namespace, and then you can imagine that once you have all this information combined together, it's really powerful to kind of pinpoint any issues, whatever happening in your cluster.
Yeah, that's incredibly amazing. I love that you used the DNS example because, like everybody says, it's always DNS. So the value really is taking these subsystem components and all these messages as it's going through the different systems and then enriching them and then giving you, how do you actually visualize that information and how does somebody, act upon it?
Yeah, that's great. So we have kind of multiple output modes. So you have like the very obvious one that where you can send this data to your metrics backend. So for example, if you have Prometheus, you can send these metrics to Prometheus, or you can use kind of a terminal or CLI if you're more into like ad hoc debugging. So we have this kubectl gadget crew plugin, which you can install and then do this more like a very conventional kind of a CLI debugging. Or you can also use like Headlamp. So we also have like a Headlamp plugin. And finally, the thing which I'm really excited about these days is that you can really hook that data into AI assistants via MCP and really kind of get all the value from all this data, which is kind of enriched and really kind of help you to pinpoint issues.
Okay. Yeah. No, okay. Now, you mentioned the AI stuff, so I'm going to put that aside for 1 minute before we get into it because I think that's going to be incredibly interesting. You mentioned this word gadgets. Can you tell me more about gadgets and what gadgets are in the context of Inspektor Gadget?
Yeah. So I talked about this technology called eBPF. So it's kind of bit it's kind of a low level technology. So for people, it can be a bit daunting. So what we do is that we have this higher level construct called gadget. And a gadget is just like a very small observability tool. It's like domain specific. So for example, we have a gadget for DNS, like I just talked about. We have a gadget for TCP, and then we have a gadget for like trying to see what kind of files are being opened, what processes are being spinned. And actually we have like a catalog of 40 gadgets So while Inspector Gadget is a framework, we also give you like this catalog. So like these little observability tools, which you can use to as per your use case. And in terms of like technicalities, it's actually like an OCI image. So it's just like we're trying to do, I like to say it like what Docker did with applications. We're trying to do that for observability. So we kind of package these observability tools in OCI images, put them in, like send them to OCI registries, and then you can run them in your Kubernetes cluster. So that's kind of what I would define a gadget is.
Excellent, excellent. I really love how, you're using all this componentry from the community. You mentioned OCI images, or, they're formerly container images. And also I thought your, analogy there was really apt with saying, hey, what Docker did for containers, we want to do for observability. And I've heard you mention a bunch of different tools out there in the ecosystem, like Headlamp and like Prometheus. So I always love a good story when, you bring a tool to the ecosystem and you leverage a bunch of other tools. And I think that really just speaks to the power of the cloud native ecosystem, is that you, with many parts, you can build a platform and an experience where, one can come in, and if you are having a DNS issue, tie all these pieces together and actually build a platform, which I think is really cool. So, I imagine, in my time running with Kubernetes, a lot can go wrong, right? And actually getting to pinpoint what's actually going wrong can be really challenging. And now, if I'm coming back to that AI, I think, there's a really interesting capability there, which I've come to learn from, is just using natural language. Just using natural language, I could describe or ask a question and getting the context specifically. So tell us a little bit more about, you mentioned MCP servers, you mentioned kind of AI and this pathway. How does this observability tool in Inspektor Gadget actually connect into AI? I want to understand that, and tell me how that works. It's exciting.
Yeah. So I think with Inspektor Gadget, we had this whole kind of this telemetry data, which is enriched with Kubernetes. And to really unlock the potential, you kind of have to, like, one of the things I was struggling is that you have to, like, when you are building an ecosystem, like, for example, a catalog of gadgets, you have to really make your user aware which gadget to pick. So when you're like when they're troubleshooting, so for example, I'm talking about DNS here. So we have a DNS gadget, but it's not obvious. A user could be searching for a networking gadget, because that's kind of how the things are right now. So what LLMs are really great at, if you give them the right context, they are able to suggest the right tools. So that's what we do with MCP. So you kind of take this catalog of gadgets, you give it to kind of LLM via this MCP, and then it kind of solves this problem of discovering the right tool to kind of to run, kind of to troubleshoot the issue like you mentioned. So I go back to like this DNS issue, and a user could come and say that, hey, I'm having an issue or a networking issue in my cluster. What should I do? And the LLM via the MCP server can figure out like, hey, Inspector Gadget has this TCP gadget, DNS gadget, it will run them. And that comes then the second challenge, that you need to be able to run them in the right way, these gadgets, right? They have these different flags, different parameters. And again, the MCP kind of helps you to kind of configure them in the right way. So that was already like kind of the challenges I was personally facing, to kind of, I wanted to focus on writing gadgets and let something else take care of recommending users the right one and actually how to run it in the best way. And finally, the pain point was like, how do you really analyze all the data you've been collecting, right? So for example, you get all these raw DNS packets, and with, okay, it has Kubernetes information, but you need to know how to analyze that. And that's again where the LLMs are there. And what they can do is that, so this kind of the three problems, like being able to discover, being able to configure the gadgets, and then analyze the output, is where I see the MCP can connect Inspector Gadget to LLMs and really shine and kind of unlock the potential for this whole observability data that we have.
Yeah, that's such a, interesting application of the technology to this problem space. And, I always like to get a little experiential questioning here. Like, the first time you actually saw this in action, how did you feel? And what did you think were the opportunities for this tool as you're interacting with it via AI and MCP and LLMs?
It was, to be honest, super exciting. I was really, really excited about it because we had these different set of gadgets, and LLM took like a very natural approach. Like it would run, like for example, I wanted to debug like a networking problem. And we have these snapshot gadgets, which can really list which sockets are open in a specific pod. So LLM would always approach it in a systematic way, like trying to see which sockets are open. So once it runs the traces, like it can correlate what is happening in your workloads. So this systematic way to troubleshoot is something AI taught me when I was like really trying to build the MVP. So I think that's kind of was really exciting in the start, and also I was and day by day when kind of the MCP server support we improved it, it got better with it. The second thing I want to say is that one thing, feature migration, right? So for example, whenever you introduce a new gadget, so for example, we had this DNS gadget or a TCP gadget, and now we just launched TCP dump gadget.
Okay.
And now TCP dump gadget is like takes the conventional TCP dump tool and you can do it across your cluster. So
yeah, incredibly powerful.
An MCP server automatically shifts to doing TCP dump. So you don't need to really kind of educate your users on kind of how to now switch to TCP dump. And that was also for me really like the way it picks up new feature was really exciting as well.
Yeah, I think that's, it's so nuanced there that you're actually creating an experience that's easier for users and the LLM's taking care of the routing for you. I haven't really heard it described in that kind of capacity before. So as you're telling me this, I'm like, that's really cool that, you're removing the burden of knowing which gadget to select, which is obviously an important decision prior to having this tool. And I think oftentimes, when I was knowing to troubleshoot, you fall into, if I'm sitting trying to troubleshoot a problem, you definitely go to tools you know and have used before, and you're less open to looking at new tools or new ways to actually solve the problem, because typically when you have an issue, you're under some kind of time crunch to get something back up because something's not working as desired. But this kind of alleviates the problem of, finding the tools, routing the right context of the tools, getting the right response. But also, for anybody new, it makes the experience of onboarding much more simple. So, yeah, really, really like to hear that you've been able to mix AI and make it really context aware here and for solving the problem. And I also like that it's kind of a very tractable solution in that you can actually get benefits from it immediately. It's not so abstract of how it's going to work. So, okay, so you've taken the work you've done in Inspektor Gadget, you've plugged it into LLMs via MCP, and you've created this experience. Can you, before I move on, like describe to me, how the experience looks now if I was to go and troubleshoot this DNS problem? Like, I think it's hard for folks to visualize kind of the change in experience if they've never used a tool like this before. So how would my troubleshooting experience for the DNS example change given what you've done plugging Inspektor Gadget into AI?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that keeps on evolving is this whole agent ecosystem. So we can maybe come back to it later on.
Okay.
But you kind of like the first thing when I was building, I was using is this Visual Studio Code, VS Code, kind of this agent mode. And you can just plug in any MCP servers in there and then really write in like the, hey, I'm having issue with my DNS kind of in Kubernetes, or you could say in a specific namespace, and then LLMs kind of picks the right tools. So in this case, what we are doing is that we're trying to map each of the gadget as an independent MCP tool. So for example, a DNS gadget would be mapped as a DNS MCP tool, and then MCP, like this VS Code agent is able to trigger that, run that for like, we have a couple of options there. You can either continuously run it, or you can run it for like, take a real-time snapshot of like 30 seconds, and then really LLM just analyzes that. Or you could run that with some filters like, hey, keep the gadget running for like, I don't know, 24 hours, but in the background, but only look for slow DNS request so that you can come back and then later on restart your VS Code agent mode and then ask it to, hey, did you find any slow DNS requests? And it actually comes back and tells you if there were like any slow DNS requests in the last day. So you can imagine it's like really exciting.
Yeah, it helps you really pinpoint, obviously, and get to the root, because I think the big challenge is, mean time to recovery, right? It's like, how long does it take me to find the needle in this haystack, which is my complete cloud native stack? and actually resolve the problem. And this sounds like it's a great way to, not only filter, but be able to observe over time as well. So you did kind of put something on the shelf there. Let's pull it off the shelf. I think that's interesting is like talking about agents. Have you thought about, tying agents together and creating even a bigger experience? Because I think it's, there's opportunity to tie it into an ecosystem of agents here and actually create an even more elevated observability experience. So can you paint us a picture of how you're thinking about that, if at all?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the first thing when we got done with the MCP. The focus was how can we even improve the kind of experience with the MCP. So MCP is just like one of the piece in the puzzle. It allows you to call some tools, and then comes the agent. The agent is just kind of like this, a model plus some tools, and then it loops over the problem iteratively. So what the thing I love about agents are like they can iteratively work on open problems like this, the one I was talking about, like networking issues or something like that. So I started looking into, for example, being able to use different agentic framework. So for example, Docker has the C agent, which is like right now a very actively developed agent, kind of a framework. And if you head to the examples there is already kind of a Kubernetes troubleshooting agent there, which you can run in your terminal, and it's like specialized in solving, like agents are domain specific, so it's specialized in just helping you with Kubernetes troubleshooting. So it's kind of, but it kind of, the Azure ecosystem is evolving, so I always have my tabs on what agent I can use, like our framework I can use to make most out of this MCP. But if someone is interested in, they can head to C agent and then they give the example of like this Kubernetes troubleshooting a try.
Yeah, that's excellent. It's really exciting to hear about the future of the tooling, and I love how the experience is changing. So I guess something that I ask everybody who comes on the show is, what are you most excited about in the future of Inspektor Gadget?
Yeah, I think for us, it's really important. Like one of the things I didn't talk about is that Inspektor Gadget is kind of like a framework, which is like you can also write your own gadgets since they live in OCI registry. So it's not really bound to what we offer. You can really write your own gadgets. So it's like really, I'm really looking forward how the kind of the community and ecosystem for these gadgets will evolve in the future. And like what make me really passionate about is that you can pick these gadgets and then you can collect any sort of data in a very flexible way. So you're not bound by anything at this point. You can really choose whatever you want to collect and then funnel that to things like LLMs we talked about. And now I was talking about agents. So I'm really looking forward to how we will be able to use these different agent frameworks to make most out of whatever we've been doing with Inspector Gadget.
That's excellent. It's certainly very, very exciting. And what gadget have you actually seen the community come up with that got you really excited? Or you thought it was a really creative way to solve a problem? I'm always amazed by what the community comes up with. Has there ever been a gadget where you're like, wow, that is a really creative gadget to build? Has there ever had a moment like that?
We still are waiting for like people to come up with these creative gadgets. So
Okay.
it's still,
so that's a call to action. There's something out there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I would say and it's like we have these gadgets now, and there are kind of people can look them up to try a few things.
Yeah.
We have had some community gadget like counting syscalls and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. But really looking forward to like more gadgets coming from people, which we can kind of make use of.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. Gadgets and agents. I just remember back to the days when I was on call and being sitting beside somebody troubleshooting something and them showing me a faster way to get a resolution than what the tools I was using. So I feel like gadgets, you can kind of get into the mind of somebody else and how they've troubleshoot, and they can package it up and make it really, consumable to a wide audience. And then of course, plug it into LLMs. I think that's great as well. So, we've talked a lot about, Inspector Gadget and the future for Inspector Gadget, which I think is great. Where can folks get plugged in and get involved in the Inspector Gadget community? Because you did mention it was a CNCF sandbox project. So
exactly.
How do folks get connected in? Maybe build that next gadget for you that you're going to get excited about.
Exactly. So we live in Inspector Gadget GitHub org. So in there you will see Inspector Gadget repository, which has the Inspektor Gadget framework code base. And then we have this IG MCP server repository there as well. And then we also live on Kubernetes Slack. So if you really want to kind of get started, you can really join the Slack and hit up us there. And what I think is really kind of we are trying to do is that we have these Hello World gadgets. So if you really want to try writing your own gadget, it's like really simple and you can give it a try. So I would definitely check that out if you find that interesting.
That's excellent. Well, thank you, Qasim. That was really inspiring. And I've had some time to play with Inspektor Gadget and been really surprised with not only how simple you've made the observability and, finding resolution experience, but also just the future. I think it's a great kind of framework where you can plug in different gadgets. So you've just opened up my imagination, and something I'm consistently, encouraged by is just the different creative solutions in the ecosystem and how they're trying to solve the problem. I think you're onto a good one with Inspektor Gadget. It's such a powerful tool, and being able to tie into the ecosystem makes it even more powerful. So thank you very much for joining us today, Qasim, and sharing us your mind and your imagination and the future of Inspektor Gadget. It's great to have you here. Thanks to everybody for joining us. All the relevant links will be in the show notes. And for folks listening in, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to let us know what you enjoyed about this topic and what topics you'd like us to cover in the future. Thank you, Qasim, and thanks everybody for joining. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much for having.